Hi, welcome to a very special in-person Unqork'd Unscripted, which is unusual for us to do in person. But Rob, who came here to visit us in our office, has been a friend, colleague, like I don't know, maybe since 2013, 14, something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
We were mutually presenting at a Napa conference,
yep,
and the words I left with were "Don't leave serendipity to chance," which is
yes,
what you were sharing.
yes.
And when I first met Rob again in my role as CEO of Uncork, and I said, "Here's what we did, and we're building this," that's exactly what you said we did. And the just that mindset has been something which I think the audience here will absolutely love to hear from. So first off,
Yes.
please do your intro. So
Oh wow. I mean, like, who am I?
who are you? Who
What?
are you? Yes. Yeah.
To quote that admiral years ago, who am I and what am I doing here? Is
Yes.
anybody old enough to remember that when Ross Perot was running for president as vice
I
presidential
remember.
candidate?
Yeah.
Yeah. So who am
That's
I and what am I doing here? So
we
I'm.
can't talk politics or debates because
No,
that will
that's
be
not. Ross
yes.
Perot is not politics.
That's okay.
Yeah. Anyway,
Good.
uh, Rob Wolcott. So I'm an adjunct professor of innovation at the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern and at the Booth School of Business at the University of Chicago. I invest in tech companies, including I'm happy to say Uncork,
Yes.
and I write. I also have a group called the World Innovation Network, or TWIN, which is a lofty way to say an Excel spreadsheet with 3,000 names on it. And Gary's one of the names. And we get together every once in a while and talk about the future. We took a trip to Rwanda earlier this year. We had the book Proximity, which we'll talk about here today. We had the book kickoff at Northern Trust in Chicago, end of May, and at the Harris Theater. As Gary knows, we always have artists involved, performers, because that makes life better. And when you bring creativity to bear on anything, it's far more exciting to live. So that's sort of the high level introduction. But you mentioned one of my favorite concepts, Gary, which is never leave serendipity to chance. It's obviously ironic. I
Yeah.
stated it ironically on purpose, but um, there is a philosophy that stuff just happens by accident.
Yep.
There's another set of philosophies that suggest that there's a meaning and purpose behind it, what Carl Jung might say synchronicity. But you know what? Regardless of what you believe on that spectrum, we can all do things to increase the likelihood of positive serendipity. You can just let life wash over you, or you can make decisions, pay attention to things, make introductions, get yourself in places where more interesting, more compelling stuff's likely to happen. And
So
that's
I
kind of
always
what I mean by
say
never leave serendipity to
so I
chance.
always say like there's a lot of noise and finding the signal through the noise
Yeah.
is your path in life.
Yes.
That's your and like as long as you're focused on like where do you want to go and what do you just block out everything that's not related to that. Like and just
Yeah.
and that's and I love the concept. So and I live by that. There's no question. So first off, like I flew to Chicago for your twin event for your book kickoff. So Proximity, which I don't know if anyone could read, but we
Well,
put it
yeah.
up here. We Rob and I did our own marketing just now, and so we did this. But and so it was an event, the twin event, where you brought together. I get to fly in first to participate in an AI roundtable with incredible think like leaders from Imperial College and Northwestern and all the schools and all the businesses, Northern Trust and I got to sit next to Howard Tolman, who was on the show last week,
Yeah,
who's
right, right. Howard's a good friend.
and just talk about like AI and what's happening and it's amazing. And then more importantly, like just the network you built, those 3,000 names on a spreadsheet, like they are incredible. They are just like this concept of bringing people together to connect. So from that one meeting, I probably had 30 meetings in the past few weeks.
Wow. Well, you're doing it right. I mean, I started it really just because it makes life better. I mean, there are commercial reasons, things that percolate as a result, but ultimately, we live for a very, very short period of time, and it's better to spend it with people who are interesting and wonderful and ethically grounded and all of that. So that's what that's about. But let me ask you this: How you set up all those meetings? You're a frenetic guy. I mean, you're not somebody that just sits back and lets life happen to you. But what does never leave serendipity to chance mean to you?
Yeah, it's to me, it's around take every meeting I can without overthinking the reasons why. And the most practical example was there was a meeting recently with someone who we keep in touch. Just we've known each other for years, and he had come to the office about 2 weeks ago, just giving an update. And he's in a very large cap company today working, and it was just a catch up.
Yeah.
No other purpose than a catch up. And he had mentioned in the meeting he just met Grady Bruch, and it's a name who I grew up with. Grady, for those who are older like me, really invented object-oriented programming and rational. He created the rational software company, Rational Roles, Unified Modeling. I read every book. Like, this is a name which is like, to me, it's like, okay, in software, and he's working like, so that one meeting, I said, would you mind introducing? Of course. So next thing you know, yesterday I spent an hour with Grady Bruch, and he'll come on the show in the next couple of weeks. He said he agreed to, which is great. But I basically just like said, here's what Unqork is. I just want to show you something. Just to me, it's, you ask for advice. You come into every meeting with the idea that you don't know where that meeting's going to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe I could help you with something. Maybe there's someone I know needs your software, your help, your services, so always go in with the mindset of like, I'm not here to just say how I help you. It's like there's be open.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? I'm curious.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in Twin, we don't have a process. We don't have a structure. We get together a few times a year. We took, for instance, an expedition to Rwanda earlier this year. There were 20 of us, and I'd never been to Rwanda. But a number of Twinians, we call ourselves Twinians, it's very kitschy. A number of Twinians are very active there, invested there for some time. One has been going for 12 years, 4 times a year, to be a mentor to entrepreneurs. And one of our Twinians just moved there. He picked up and moved there and has founded a company that's going gangbusters, Bio Usawa. And they kept saying, Rob, we have to go to Rwanda. Rob, we have to go to, and after a while, I said, okay, let's go to Rwanda. But the other reason was there was this synchronicity as well, that this is 30 years after a genocide. And I don't know if people remember, but this was literally the end of the world. And 30 years later, the country is the most successful in Africa.
Wow.
And when you see something like that going on in the world's a big place, but it's also not that big. I say, you know what? I want to go and see what's going on there. I want to see this in action. And then the indicators, like the weak signals from the universe, were all my friends and twins saying, we need to take a trip to Rwanda. And there's a point where you say, okay, I'm going to follow that. And we went, and it was absolutely phenomenal. And particular with respect to proximity, the book that you and I have talked about quite a bit, and Unqork is featured in the book.
It's our first ever call out in any book. So
I'm sure not the last.
Pages, and I was like, when you published it, I was like, it was on my wall. I've got copies. I've got like your signed copy. I've got everything. But it's amazing. It really is.
Well, thank you. I mean, you guys are leading that in your corner of the universe with no-code platforms, where anybody who has something they want to accomplish in the world can do it a lot faster, a lot easier, a lot more reliably than having to go and find a team of developers and do an RFP and hire a firm, and then 18 months later get the software they didn't think they wanted, but they signed the contract. So this is a 100% proximity, what you're doing. But maybe to back up and explain what is proximity. In 2014, I was at a tech conference, and you of all people go to a lot of tech conferences.
Yes.
And I noticed we were probably I'm sitting in the audience, probably on the 10th speaker. And I noticed that the 10th speaker was saying the same stuff as the 9th speaker, who was saying the same stuff as the proof by induction here. Okay,
that's a tech conference. That's fine. That's yes.
And at the time, there were a couple of slides. In particular, one I loved was everybody had some version of the slide, which was, by the year 2025, 1 trillion devices will be connected. Yeah. And I'm thinking, this is a tech conference. Do you really need to tell people that? I mean, if anybody in this audience doesn't already know that, they really need to leave. I mean, so it's kind of, I was stewing in my own juices there, really. And I thought, we've got to be able to do better than this, because we need better foresight. If you're going to make investment decisions, if you're going to start Unqork, go out and tell people we're going to create the future, we need better foresight. And so I thought about one of my first loves, which is history and economics and technology and innovation, all that. And I said, what is fundamentally different about digital technologies And I mean all sorts of digital. Could be rooftop solar, could be 3D printing, anything digitally enabled. What is fundamentally different about digital compared to the industrial age?
Yeah.
And when you boil it down to its essence, what you discover is all sorts of digital technologies allow us to compress capabilities in smaller and smaller packages and put them all over the place, ever closer to each moment of demand. And that is fundamentally different than industrial age technologies. And so when you recognize that, you get to the next step, and this is proximity. Digital compels the production and provision of value, products, services, experiences, ever closer to the moment of actual demand in time and space. Now, when I first started talking about this, the first time was a panel for The Economist in 2015 or 16. And most people thought, oh, yeah, he means better supply chain management.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, yeah. You know, what that is let's take the model as it currently is and make little changes to it.
Yes, just in time. And
That's nice, but that's not what we're talking about. We're, with proximity, my co-author, Kai-Han Krippendorf, and I are literally talking about setting up technology platforms and business models to incentivize us to procrastinate, to wait as long as possible until there's an actual customer user with a specific need set, and then create and provide that product, service, or experience. And so if you think about Unqork, that's what you're doing. You're creating a technology platform that can do lots of different stuff, reliably, and it sits there kind of doing nothing until a user sits down and says, I need a system to manage checkout in my store.
Yes.
Done, right? And it doesn't take 18 months to do it. So you can think about 3D printing.
Just-in-time creation.
Just on demand, just in time, everything, everywhere. And
I like it.
And Gary, I'll turn it over to you in a second, but I mean, just to jump forward, because I know your listeners are pretty sophisticated. They're in tech, they know tech, but just to carry it kind of to the crazy end, if you want to get a little crazy.
I want to get crazy. Let's
get
crazy.
All right. Our last chapter in proximity, we look at how we work, how we eat, how we create and produce, how we prevent and cure, how we power, and how we defend. But in the last chapter, we look at the two horizons of the 21st century, two environments humans have never really been in, and that's space and virtual reality. And here's the exciting thing. Both are 100% proximate. What does that mean? Well, before COVID, I was speaking with Dorit Noviel, who's part of Twin. She's a professor of space health at Baylor, and that's a pretty cool title. Space health, yeah. And she allocates money from TRISH, which is the grant program from NASA, to do research in space health. And when I was explaining proximity, she said, oh my God, you know what, Rob? Everything we're doing to help humans thrive in space is to drive proximity. I didn't know that, but now I know it. And here's why. She said, if you're on a spaceship for 7 months to Mars, you've only got what's on the spaceship. You have absolutely nothing else. You can't call Amazon because you forgot something. I mean, not yet. I'm sure Amazon will figure that out. But her point was, all the research going on to help humans live in space is to drive proximity. And by definition, those insights are going to come back to Earth. And we're going to start, we already are seeing businesses. I've invested in a couple that are driving those insights back to real money-making businesses here on Earth. And then virtual reality, I mean, that gets nutty. The more and more it gets like actually experiencing the universe, the more and more you can have any experience, anytime, anywhere.
Do you have an Apple Vision Pro?
I don't. I've tried a whole bunch of different VR systems.
Yeah.
Of course, some are impressive, but they're still clunky. You got to put that stupid thing on, you run into walls, actual walls. That's all exciting.
Me on a plane, you will see. My Apple Vision Pro. It sits
while you're on the plane
until I get to a plane, and then when I put those on, I am in another world. So I don't even. I could do flights all the time without even feel like I'm on a plane.
Well, by the way, Gary.
Yes.
What if that air thing drops from the top and you're not even going to see it?
People are going to be like,
who's the guy with the glasses?
They haven't thought through that concept yet of seeing it drop and shutting it off and being like, hey, warning, you should put on the I like the concept, but it is you could block out everyone on the plane and you wouldn't even know who's around you, and it's kind of incredible.
We don't make date predictions in the book, but 20, 30, 40 years, whenever it is, VR will be indistinguishable from default reality. And we'll be able to do things we can't do.
Are we all living in a virtual reality right
Could
now.
be in the Matrix. We could be in the Matrix now.
It's one of my favorite movies. It is absolutely like that concept. Was it Elon said it's a 1 in a billion chance, right, that we are right now in it. Maybe all the AI we're doing is going to eventually figure out that we cracked the code, and that's what it is. Who knows?
Maybe.
But,
I mean, in a way, we all live in virtual reality already because our brains don't experience anything directly except for electrical signals. And they take electrochemical and it processes and creates a sense of reality, whatever that means. Now, obviously, we have guardrails. We can't just imagine. We can imagine anything we want, but if I imagine I can jump off this building and fly, I'm going to discover pretty quickly that doesn't work.
yes.
But in the virtual world,
yes,
that does work.
I love the concept. So Rob, how did you get? What was your story? Where did you go to school? How did you get into where you are right now in your past?
Well, I love my my alma mater, Northwestern University. I did undergrad, master's, PhD. Grew up in the Chicago area. Did all my degrees there. Undergrad in history, PhD in industrial engineering. Long story as to how that transition happened.
I was going to say, like, there's some point where there's hey, I got to one chapter in history, and I'm like, hey, this looks like fun.
A couple years of pain, but lots of years of gain, and I've been super happy with it. But honestly, that's not where it started. I know exactly when my love of innovation and technology started. It was in the 4th grade, and I was at the school library. For those of you who don't know, there used to be these things called books. And there was a library.
You know, my kids make fun of me that I used to go to the librry to read joke books. I used to they joke
really
books at the library. They had and they're like, come on, like that's ridiculous.
Right. I think years ago somebody gave me Big Book of Yiddish Jokes or something like that, which is a really big book. But in any case, so I checked this book out of the library called American Heritage Illustrated Book of Men and Their Inventions, and it was a history of the Industrial Revolution. Wow. And Eli Whitney, cotton gin, Thomas Edison, light bulb, all these things. And I was hooked, and I checked it out again and again and again until I couldn't check it out anymore. And then I kept the book. And then the librarian called my mom, and I got in trouble. So I clearly didn't have any friends as a kid. But that was it. I knew that I was going to be in technology in some way, but I didn't know if I was going to be an entrepreneur or an engineer or a designer. I never thought I'd become a professor, and I'm glad I did. But in any case, that's where it started.
I love the story. That's I thought you were going to say you got a bill like 20 years later for like $10,000 of late fees, or
you're thinking of the Seinfeld episode, right?
Yes.
Where the guy shows up. Yeah.
See, that's the kids growing up today. They don't have that. They don't have the libraries. They don't have the Seinfeld. I don't.
Gary, do you really want to go to kids today? Do you really want to start that here?
God.
I mean, this is supposed to be about the future, not the past. Kids today.
I love it. I love it. So Rob, you congrats on the journey and the launch of the book. And I'm seeing everywhere on LinkedIn to success and where you're speaking about it. So it's amazing. At your Twin conference, you went up on stage and you had the theme of one of my favorite movies, Willy Wonka, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Yeah. So I went home and I was playing that on the radio, on the radio. I was playing that on my phone for the kids, and they're like, "What is that?"
Yeah.
And I'm like it's a beautiful song. What does the song mean to you? Like
Gary's talking about the song Pure Imagination. And in the Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, you can find the original version. Gene Wilder, who's Willy Wonka, is introducing his universe, is singing the song Pure Imagination. If you read the words, it's not a very long song. There's one part, for instance, that says, in a world of pure imagination, it says, want to change the world, there's nothing to it.
Yeah.
And in a world of pure imagination, he actually means there's nothing to it. You just decide, done.
Yes.
And actually, Gary, I'm jumping way too far ahead, but my current book is Proximity. The next book is Post-Virtual, which Kaihan and I introduced a little bit in the last chapter of Proximity. It's a concept for the further future. And the third book will be called Pure Imagination. And it's cued off of the title of that song. But the reason it's meaningful to me is, first of all, it's a great movie. And I was, yourself, I was a kid and I'm like, oh my God, what is this? And I love chocolate. Who doesn't like chocolate? but this guy is inventing stuff and creating things and goading people and challenging them about their ethics, about their place in the world. he's challenging them about their desires. If you look at each of these kids, that one that gets sucked up the thing and the other one becomes a huge blueberry, it's like an ethic play, a morality play about desire and ego and all these things. And it was absolutely, so there's a moralistic undertone that I think is actually quite well done, that I loved. But the reason the third book is called Pure Imagination is, after we get to the point where you can't tell the difference between virtual reality and default reality, that's what Moran Cerf, the neuroscientist Moran Cerf, and I call the post-virtual world. After the point we're in the post-virtual world, all of our lived experience will be defined by pure imagination. And the notion of whatever you imagine you can create, you know, that trite thing, just imagine it and you can become it, which is a load of bullshit. I mean, people are like, just imagine it. I mean, okay, kind of metaphorically. But in a post-virtual world, it's literal. Whatever you can imagine, and even things you can't, can become real.
So Ready Player One, one of my favorite books. Like that is outside of our.
I admit I haven't read the book. I did see the movie.
You saw the movie.
I haven't
the book.
Read the book.
But like it is that concept, which is like, what does our life look like if we're living in a virtual? Everything's in a virtual world. Yeah, we're close to it today. We're not like majority of my meetings today are still Zoom. Like, and if the Apple Vision glasses could simply not make me look like Max Headroom, I'll throw another 80s character since we're on that theme. Like, if it could make me look completely real, I would just keep those on all day and work all day. Because I would be in my pajamas and I look like I'm dressed now, like in a t-shirt, which is not far off from my pajamas, but like that's.
But you know, you'd probably also decide to, you know, have a six-pack and be. But that's possible in the post-virtual world.
It is possible.
But you know, part of the reason I went to Moran Cerf, who's a good friend, neuroscientist. He teaches at Columbia Business School now, and the reason I went to him originally was I was thinking about this post-virtual concept, and I wanted to ground it in science. And I wanted somebody who really knew what the hell they were talking about with respect to the way the neural systems work, the way we understand the universe, our cognition, embodied cognition, the whole thing. And I said, is this possible? And he said, absolutely and likely, and there's nothing standing in the way. But here is the pivotal technology set that's already being developed. Elon Musk, of course, has Neuralink, and that's the invisible interface. Once we have various kinds of invisible interfaces, the most obvious one being direct brain machine interface. Once we have that and it's working, and by the way, again,
Neuralink, but it's
Neuralink, but writ large, right?
And
again, we're not making date predictions.
Yes.
Could be 6 years, could be 60. We don't care. What we're asserting is, unless we blow ourselves up, sometime later this century we'll be in that environment where you won't have to have headphones on, you won't have to have glasses on. You might not even need an implant in an intraocular lens, for instance, which we already have. You can install an intraocular lens. Eventually, it'll be directly with your cognitive system, and then it really will be like experiencing "quote unquote" reality. And then it'll be dimensionality of reality.
And then it's Ray Kurzweil singularity, because we could each think and talk to each other through thought.
Telekinesis and well, you know what I mean. Telekinesis, moving stuff around with your head. That's coming. I mean, we already have the ability to make that sort of thing happen with technology in both ends. But so I love Kurzweil and Diamandis, so this is not a dig, but I actually happen to think the post-virtual threshold is far more profoundly important for understanding where humanity might go than the singularity, than the point where AI passes our capabilities and or we're integrated with AI. I think that's absolutely essential and extraordinary and terrifying and all those things. But the post-virtual transition talks about our lived experiences and individually, as communities, as groups, as humanity, and also unlocks anything and everything to be possible. And unfortunately, history tells us that humans aren't great at making decisions when faced with abundance. I mean, we get fat and we waste time watching Netflix or Gary and Rob having silly conversations online.
You're right about that. That's
So-
that goes back to the another movie, Wall-E, where they're in space and they're just like
Yeah.
blobs. We become blobs with
Yeah.
shakes.
Well, it's interesting
that's
you bring up the blobs with shakes from Wall-E. This is you're talking about where
That's the space health. Your
yeah
friend.
humans are in the wheelchair with a Slurpee. Right?
Yes,
Now
exactly.
that's a nice story, and we talk about this in proximity.
Yes.
That's a nice story, but it's hoo-ha. It's BS. It's not going to happen. Why is that? And we say this in the book. Why is that? Because if our technology is capable of enabling people to live in space stations and on other planets, have androids that can make our beds and do whatever, then we're going to figure out technology to keep us from, being fat blobs in a wheelchair. I mean, duh.
We have it. It's a shot.
It's called GLP-1.
Yes.
We already have the beginning of it.
We have it already. Yes.
So what happens
I like that.
in sci-fi and is that people extrapolate from where we are today and say it's going to be more of that, but that's usually not what happens.
So I assume you are very excited about the next 20, 30, 50 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think the next 20 or so is going to be far more difficult than most people think.
In what way?
Dislocations, we're already starting to see at the edges as a result of AI, for instance, for certain groups of the population.
So do that. So AI.
And there'll be positives too. I'm not saying there won't be.
Yeah.
But there'll be social dislocations. The communication, the way that social media has changed the way we communicate is causing dislocations and tensions that are analogous to what happened after the printing press. Yeah. And remember, when the printing press, this was before your time, of course, but when the printing press was launched, soon after that, the Reformation occurred.
Yes.
And the wars of religion that rocked Central Europe. It was one of the most devastating periods in the history of Europe. And so what the way I like to think about it is when we change the way we communicate, we change the ways we congregate. And this is what we're seeing again with social media and the polarization. I actually call it atomization of politics in America as opposed to polarization. So I think the next 20 years are going to be in many ways far more challenging than most people think. But I'm very optimistic about 30 or 40 years out.
So that's what you said, if we don't blow ourselves up before.
Exactly. I'm very, in the book, in the chapter How We Eat in Proximity, I talked to Jack Bobo, who's one of the world's leading minds on agriculture and innovation. And he posed a provocative vision of the future that, I mean, I really can't argue with it. I totally bought in. He said the next 30 years will be the most important 30 years in the history of humanity in terms of how we conquered the food challenge. One, because the population's increasing and it starts to slow down by our demographic projections.
Yes.
But two, because lifespans are increasing.
Yeah.
Right. And if we figure out in the next 30 years how to solve the food problem, we'll actually solve it beyond as well. So he thinks that the next 30 years of figuring out the equations of energy.
So do you believe in lab-grown food?
Yes,
you do.
100%. In the book, we talk about, for instance, Aleph Farms and Remilk in Israel. A group from Twin visited there in January of last year. Thank be to God, we went before the conflict started. But we visited Aleph, and Aleph is making lab-grown meat. And everybody's able to make hamburger. The hard thing is steak, but that's an engineering challenge. They're going to figure it out. And when you do the math, this is all about proximity. When you do the math, if I could have a room this size and make meat in it, the economics, the ability to place closer to demand, the ability to respond to specific needs is orders of magnitude different than having to get thousands of acres somewhere, raise thousands of heads of cattle, move them to slaughter them, not to mention the ethical issues, slaughter them, cut them up, send the steaks out. You see the difference?
Yes.
It is an utterly fundamentally different model. It doesn't work yet. It's not economical yet. And there are two things in the way. One is the technology, that's getting better. Two, energy. When we can solve the sustainable, distributed, reliable, accessible power problem, we've solved distributed agriculture. So proximate power equals proximate agriculture.
I love it. And that AI is consuming the power, so it's even taking away more and more. So
it is.
Power becomes the most critical piece.
But eventually that'll be free. That'll trend toward free later this century, not next year. But you see, like that's another factor, Gary. The next decade or so, the energy challenge will be greater and greater. But thankfully, we have this thing called technology and we have science, and we're able to drive down that cost dramatically if we make smart investments. So I think 20, 30 years from now, we'll be trending toward a world where electricity becomes increasingly free and widely available, like Nikola Tesla envisioned over 100 years ago.
My son, my 11-year-old son Skylar had said, I think you need 100 miles of solar panels to power the world today, something like that. I don't know if it's true.
I don't know.
There's some number which
sounds good.
It sounds great. It sounds like we should have that.
Yeah, let's go.
Like why? Let's do it. And it's really interesting. I don't, but it's amazing to see the kids work with technology. You're still teaching as an adjunct instructor.
Yeah.
I'm assuming the challenges in classroom, there's more questions on future and AI coming into your space.
Sure.
And you have to be ready for that.
Yeah.
God, I would love to be in your class one day and just listen.
Well, you're welcome to come.
That'd be amazing.
Depending, I mean, obviously if it's a private custom thing for a specific corporation,
then I would not.
That's not going to work. But if you want to come to my EMBA class in August at Booth, I can probably do a deal and have you sit in the corner.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Especially if you speak.
I could do that.
Yeah.
I could speak. We could do this. This is good. I love the idea. Like, I was an adjunct instructor at NYU for many years. I loved teaching.
Yeah.
I loved, because you could see, you're always on your toes. You're always there. And so Rob, you and I could go all day. I'm watching the clock and saying we're over the 30, and I want to just get one more. What's, outside of proximity, your favorite book? Tell me.
What my favorite book? Oh, holy cow. Well, you know what? I'll mention two to come to mind right away. There are so many. Well, I'm going to mention four. Tell me quickly. Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl.
Wow.
And anybody who hasn't seen it, get it, read the first half. Second half is logotherapy. It's interesting. First half is him navigating through concentration camps. And it's absolutely, it's one of the most transformative books.
Okay, I'm going to read this.
In history. Second book is about philosophy, and it's part of my post-virtual project. It's by an American pragmatist philosopher named Richard Rorty. He died in 2007. Get the book. It's called Philosophy is Poetry. And he doesn't mean this metaphorically, okay? But just to give you a quick punchline, one of the things he said was, truth is what you can get away with saying. Now think about where we are today with social media and fake news and all that. Okay?
And politics. Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
And then the other two, which we don't have to talk too much about because I think everybody will know them.
Yeah.
1984.
Yep. Good.
And Brave New World.
Brave New World.
They are guardrails of dystopia for where we're trending in the future. And they're complementary books. We talk about them in proximity.
Yeah.
And I'll end with one of my favorite stories from the history of science, technology, literature, sci-fi. George Orwell sent a copy of the manuscript. He couldn't find a publisher. Sent a copy of the manuscript to Aldous Huxley. Huxley was already famous, well known. Huxley was Orwell's tutor at Eton. So they knew each other from years before. And Aldous Huxley sent Orwell a beautiful letter back. You can imagine, he sent a beautiful letter. Look it up online. And he said to Orwell, this is undoubtedly a masterpiece. However, I believe my dystopic view of the future is much more likely to happen. The Brave New World vision of enforced happiness, fleeting happiness. If you're feeling anxiety, if you're feeling depression, if you're feeling anything but absolute happiness, you must take a pill called Soma. And this is how they controlled the population. Whereas in 1984, it's with a boot. In Brave New World, it's with a pill. And I see these as both rolling out in the world right now in different ways. And they're our guardrails for where we don't want to go.
I love it. I love it.
What's your favorite book?
I love behavioral economic books and anything to do with how crazy we are. From,
Thinking Fast and Slow. Yeah, of course.
Barking Up the Wrong Tree, I think, is an amazing book. And just, to me, it's all about, we are still developing. And I think the number one thing I always tell my kids is be uncomfortable and just constantly be in a state of uncomfortable, just because you'll learn, you'll grow. I think people get so with Unqork'd, we're constantly we are the biggest disruption in tech. We are the biggest change. We know that. We make people uncomfortable.
Yeah, yeah.
Like that's what we do. Is we
Yeah.
basically.
I remember at the beginning of your journey, people would say, "No, that's not possible.
It's not possible." We
Right.
were told absolutely. Like you invested. There's so many people that said, "Never going to work. Never going to happen." And so we make people. But like the truth is, that's where you grow. That's the. Otherwise, we'd all still be doing test tubes and coding with punch cards. Like we'd be using an IBM punch card machine in this room. And it's like, how else do you grow and you move up? Is
Amen.
You'd be uncomfortable. That's it. So that's I tell everyone, as uncomfortable as you possibly can be it. And though that's definitely the view. That's so.
I'm all for being uncomfortable as long as it includes a 5-star hotel with a nice bathroom.
Oh, actually, so I should have said I cannot camp because
no camping.
I can't deal with the bugs and the cold shower.
Yes, yeah.
So I've never done it. When you said Rwanda, that was the first thing that came to mind.
No.
It was
Rwanda
like 5-star.
Amazing.
Is it 5-star?
Well, you can stay out in the wilderness, or you could stay at a stunning. We actually stayed in. If anyone is interested, reach out to me on LinkedIn. Tell me we met here, because obviously I can't see you, but reach out to me on LinkedIn. And if anybody's interested, we stayed in this most wonderful place in Rwanda. It's truly an extraordinary place. And actually Prince Charles, when he was a prince, stayed there. It's there. You can find everything in Rwanda.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. But so Rob, thank you for being a supporter, investor. Thank you for including Unqork'd in your amazing book, Proximity. So everyone should go out and definitely buy it. It will be everyone's favorite book. And we'll look for the next 2 follow-up versions coming out. So I love the Post World and
Post-virtual.
Post-virtual, Pure Imagination.
Pure Imagination.
Pure Imagination, like just, it is like the idea that you could build anything and do it in just in time. We're there. We're there in one piece of it. The idea that I can make a grilled cheese up here, we're not there yet. But when that happens, I will be.
It's just atoms. It's like a replicator on Star Wars, right? Or Star Trek.
Star Trek.
Yeah, Star Wars is BS.
Jetsons, where they like
Jetsons, yes.
I like it. Yeah. That's very cool. My suitcase car that flies. That's what I need. That's it. But Rob, thank you so much for coming on, and it's been great having you as part of the team. Thanks everyone for joining another Unqork'd Unscripted. See you soon. Thanks.